Hi, everyone, and welcome into the SunDevilSource Podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. Gabby Chernoff, Chris Cartman, and Jake Sloan here with a little bit of an Around the Horn podcast for this ASU football bye week, but mostly an ASU hockey preview as they get set to host number 5 Penn State this Friday. So we're going to get right into it with just a little bit of a football bye week update. In practice this week, it was a lot of the younger player scrimmages. AJ Cooper said yesterday that it was a good chance for the young players to really develop and step up, and kind of a good measuring stick to kind of see where they're at. And then red zone struggles have plagued ASU the past couple weeks. Kenny Dillingham said between Baylor and TCU, it was they were struggling from the 20 to the end zone, and now they were just struggling from the 5 to the end zone. So Chris, just overall bye week thoughts, and especially on those two things that we've seen this week.
Yeah, last year ASU improved dramatically throughout the season, addressing a lot of its weaknesses as the season unfolded. And you could see pretty clearly that they have an improving idea of who they are as a team and with their schemes and their personnel. And they continue to really hone in on some of their weaknesses, and that short red area in particular, inability to run the ball without Cam Skadabu or Lee Fautanu at center. On the interior, not having Jalen Moss as a slot weapon, those things have been problematic. Now they have had Jalen Moss back in practices, including working with the ones. That's probably the biggest news development that's happened. Xavier Alford and Cyrus Fiasse remain out, and they will be. And yeah, the young player development, super crucial. That's something that a lot of the sophomores and juniors on this particular team really benefited from 2 years ago or last season. And we've seen the emergence of a lot of those guys, Rodney Bimage, Martell Hughes, Keith Abney 2 years ago wasn't really, having a role. And now he's one of the best players on the team. That came from this development that they were able to demonstrate in some of these key bye week practices.
ASU takes on, of course, Utah next week. They haven't really gotten into too much with that yet as far as scouting and really getting into that Utah preparation, but that was announced to be a 7:15 kickoff off the top of my head, I believe, Utah time.
Correct. Yeah, on ESPN. And the Utah prep's sort of just starting. I think they worked about maybe half or less than half of their practice on Wednesday. Thursday and this weekend, media's not at the practices, but they're going to be getting a lot more into Utah.
And then just across Packard there, what street is that? I'm blinking. I think it might be Packard. DFA is hosting Moonlit Madness for the basketball programs on Friday as well. That'll start at 9 p.m. And then we'll have a more in-depth basketball preview coming in a couple weeks too, as that season draws closer. Chris, I know you kind of inquired about some news with the basketball team as of late as well.
Yeah, I haven't reported this anywhere yet, but all of ASU scholarship players are cleared eligibility-wise, academically, everything. Super important because Trevor Best is the only returning player on scholarship on the team. And they have 14 newcomers, a lot of whom arrived via Europe or Africa. There were some questions about visas, academic eligibility, et cetera. And all those barriers are jumped over. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the team on Friday at 9 o'clock DFA at their Moonlit Madness. It's the first opportunity to learn more about a roster that is the most opaque and unknown, I would say, in my entire time covering ASU.
Well, very similar theme actually going on with the hockey roster. They have 17 total newcomers. We're going to get into a very in-depth roster preview this very highly anticipated Penn State matchup after a quick word from our presenting sponsor, Jones Auto Centers.
For over 60 years, the Glenn Jones name has been recognized for integrity and honesty.
In the Jones Auto Centers in Wickenburg.
Jones Ford Verde Valley.
Take a nice country drive out to Buckeye.
When you're talking about Arizona's best, you're talking about the Jones Auto Group. It's quick, fast, strong.
I want to invite you to visit our new facility in Casa Grande and enjoy our country-style way of doing business. We're the Joneses.
Welcome back in to the SunDevilSource Podcast, presented, of course, as you saw, by Jones Auto Centers. It's hockey season in the desert, a very highly anticipated matchup. I would venture to say it's the biggest home opener in ASU program history. ASU enters this matchup ranked number 14 in the UCHO preseason poll, Penn State at number 5. Like I mentioned before the break, 17 newcomers on this roster. That is the overwhelming majority of this roster. A very big handful of freshmen as well. But there's so much changing with the landscape of college hockey. We're seeing CHL guys and AHL players now venturing their way into college hockey. ASU has one or a few of players from both of those categories. But another newsworthy and very noteworthy thing going into this college hockey season, the NCAA has expanded its scholarship cap from 18 to 26. This is something it's been doing across all collegiate sports. So, Chris, based on what Greg Powers has said, and of course you're very knowledgeable about the whole changing landscape, NIL, scholarship cap expansion, what does this mean for hockey?
Well, it's going to allow Greg Powers to build a more talented and deeper roster. Same is going to be the case across all of the primary hockey teams nationally. And actually, some of them could benefit even more than ASU due to the way revenue sharing works at a lot of these schools. They could allocate more money to hockey at schools that don't have football or men's basketball, or they're not as prominent in those regards. And in the past, the scholarships were partial for most of the players on the team. So they had to, their families or themselves had to come out of their own pockets to pay for a lot of the aspects of going to school. And that's no longer the case. That makes it a little bit of an easier sell for people around the country or in in Canada or other places to decide to go to ASU. And then the second part of this, as you said, there is that who's going to do the best job of evaluating and identifying which players to bring in from the CHL, which is going to be significantly hurt by the NCAA's expansion and kind of what the changes are there. And how much is ASU going to be able to capitalize on some of these relative to other teams in the NCHC or the Big Ten or the Hockey East. And Greg Powers said that he thinks this is going to be the most talented and deepest roster that he will have, and how that compares relative to the Denvers of the world and Western Michigans of the world, I think is going to largely determine how ASU does in the pecking order this year. But we do know that after ASU was picked last in its inaugural NCHC season, it's now picked fourth. So there's a lot more respect and credit that's been given to this program, even with probably a majority of its most important players departing after last season.
Yeah, and kind of to your point there, Greg Powers said this is the deepest and the most talented roster we've ever had, but because their prospect pool doubled with the entire CHL now available to college hockey, so is every other team. Every other team has that same pool to pick from. They're deeper and more talented as ever, and as we'll get into a little bit later, that's definitely the case for this Penn State team as well. Just kind of looking into that earlier, they have a handful of great returners and some newcomers that they've brought in as well. But Jake, with 17 newcomers on this roster, there's a few veteran guys that are going to really need to step up. There's even a newcomer who earned a letter on his jersey as an assistant captain. So given everything with the increased scholarship, the increased talent pool, how will that help ASU, given that it has to replace so many of its very talented starters that earned it a second place regular season finish in the NCHC last year and took it to that NCHC Frozen Face-Off?
Yeah, when you just look at the roster this year, starting off with the forwards, ASU lost its top 3 scorers with Ryan Kerwin, who led the NCHC with 26 goals, Artem Schlane, who was the first team all NCHC and team MVP in his only year with ASU, and Lucas Sillinger, who led the team with 30 assists, and is ASU's all-time leader with 69 total assists. That's a lot of offensive production to replace, but the top three guys that are expected to kind of step up into their roles are the co-captains, Kyle Smolin and Bennett Shimmick, who were awarded with that honor this offseason, kind of have that good cop, bad cop little dynamic going on between them. And then Colin Potter, everyone knew how talented he was coming into college hockey as a 17-year-old freshman, and he proved it winning NCHC freshman of the he was on the NCHC freshman all-freshman team, was the first player in ASU history to be drafted in the first round of the NHL draft when the Calgary Flames took him 32nd overall. And he was the only Sun Devil on the preseason NCHC team, which just kind of shows the recognition that he's getting. So those three guys are kind of slated to step up into the shoes that Kerwin, Schlame, and Sillinger all were in last year. But with them stepping up, they need the freshmen coming in to kind of take their roles that they were in last year. And I'd say that the top three guys to kind of look there, first off, would be Ben Kevin. He was playing with Colin Potter this summer on the Team USA U18 team, which ended up winning the bronze medal over the summer. And then he was also drafted in the NHL draft, 63rd overall by the New Jersey Devil. He's going to be a guy that brings in a lot of size on that forward line, which ASU's kind of been missing the last couple of seasons. And it was really apparent in NCHC play last year. I don't know if I can attest for all of us, but I just know whenever an NCHC team came to play at Mullet Arena, the size difference was very apparent. And I think Greg Powers kind of set out to make that discrepancy not as big and maybe try to become even more physical than other teams, bringing in a lot of guys that are 6 feet, 190, 200 pounds that still have that high level skill, but now they have that physicality where if there's a battle for the puck in the corner along the boards, they're not getting shoved out of the way as much as they were last year. And then them being able to possess the puck a lot more freely can open up some things offensively for them down the road. But I talked about Ben Kevin. Another guy that really stands out to me is the 21-year-old freshman, Sam Alfano. He scored 84 points in 68 games in the OHL last year, was sixth in the OHL with 41 goals tacked on, 43 assists. He's a really do-it-all guy. He's very physical with his 6'4" frame. He's tied for the tallest height on the team, so he brings that aspect, but just the offensive talent from him kind of reminds me of someone like Ryan Kerwin, who can just stick around the net, just be ready to be set up by anybody from opposite face-off circles for a lot of those one-timer goals that Kerwin benefited from with his relationship with Sillinger last year. So those are two guys that I'm really looking out for. And then another guy that kind of stood out to me is Austin Zemlak. This past year, he was in the WHL with the Tri-City Americans, although he scored just 25 points in 56 games. As a defenseman, he earned an assistant captain with the Americans, and that just kind of shows the type of leadership that he had at such a young age, and that really stood out for me. And then another defensive freshman that I was looking at is Justin Kipke, and he's also tied with Alfano at 6'4". He's really big. He's only 20 years old, so he spent this past summer in the WHL with the Victoria Royals, scored 62 points in 64 games as a defenseman, 50 assists. He was the captain of the Royals, which again, Powers, I think, really made it a big point of emphasis to bring in these guys who are physical and also have leadership skills that they experienced in the past, because he lost so many seniors and graduates that he knew he could count on in the locker room.
Yeah, and kind of to your point, this has been a theme for ASU hockey the past few seasons. It's something that Greg Powers has really liked to do, is he's brought in kind of older veteran presences. Is that the plural of presence? I don't think I've ever had to use the word in that regard. But you look back 2 years ago, he brought in Tyler Gratton. He was on his final year of eligibility from Penn State, actually. He was voted the captain of the team, made an impact in that regard. And then he brought in a few veteran players last year as well. Ryan Kerwin and Artem Schlane both used up their final years of eligibility. Ryan Kerwin also actually went to Penn State, so maybe he just has a knack for taking those grad students from Penn State. And then Artem Schlane as well, two of the program's best scorers last year. And then Noah Beck on the back end. He was the most physical presence ASU had on its back end, and just came in and was an immediate contributor. He is signed with the Sharks now. And Luke Pavicic, they brought him in as a goaltender. He started a majority of the games over junior goaltender last year, who has since transferred to North Dakota in Gibson Homer. So it's kind of been a theme that they bring in a lot of veteran guys, and even when they do have a lot of newcomers, it seemed like those newcomers really do contribute immediately to the team and kind of help gel the team together. But as far as bringing those new guys together, 2 new captains, Bennett Shimmick and Kyle Smolin, they're co-captains. Haven't seen that from this program in a long time. But we talked to Connor Hasley, ASU's new goaltender, who we'll get into a little bit later. He said, we really are a very tight-knit group. We stay up playing Chell probably a little bit longer than we should on most nights. And Shimmick and Smolin both said that they're very competitive at Golfland. They talked about it last week, and then we asked Anthony Dowd about it this week. He said Tucker Ness is the best golfer because he takes 4 hours to putt, and Bennett Shimmick maybe not as strong on the golf course. Golfland, a very fun place, though. I would highly recommend it. It's a great place to go. But with that, we're going to get into a position by position breakdown now. Jake, you briefly touched on some of the forwards, but with so many newcomers, it's kind of hard to predict whether or not Greg Powers will keep some of those guys who were together last year. For example, just off the top of my head, Bennett Shimmick and Cruz Lucius, 2 returners. They played on the same line a lot of the times with Cullen Potter last year as well too. But I'm wondering if he's going to keep those 3 guys together and have lines of just like fully newcomers, or if he's going to try to like break them up and then kind of scatter those returners throughout the lineup with those newcomers. It's really kind of hard to pinpoint what the answer to that question is going to be until we do see a lineup tomorrow. But Jake, just kind of your overarching thoughts on this forward group and what we can expect to see tomorrow night at Mullet.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. It's very hard to kind of decipher which way he'll go with this. I think having a player like Smolin, where he was put up and down the lineup so much last year, he said himself, availability is the best ability, and Powers held him to that. I think having someone like that will allow Powers to just move guys as he chooses. I think because of how much trust he has in Shimmick, Smolin, Potter, and Cruz Lucius, who was also awarded an assistant captain role this offseason. I think he might try to split them up to start off the season just to see how much of a leader they become. But also having a guy like Sean McGurn, who is in his first year, is transferred in from the University of New Brunswick up in Canada. He hasn't played a game for Greg Powers yet. Powers already gave him an A on his sweater, showing how much trust he has in him. So I think having another guy like that, where you can give him an assistant captain role and kind of put him on that tier of returners in terms of leadership, I think will allow him to kind of spread the wealth a little bit and maybe have 1 or 2 of those returners on the line together as one of your top lines. But then as you trickle down with all the newcomers, kind of allowing them to build their own chemistry. And it's very difficult because in college hockey, you're not allowed to practice. You're not allowed as a team a full week of practice until game week, unlike college football and basketball, where they're on the court in the field all summer long with each other. In college hockey, you have to wait until the Monday before your game before you can actually start to get a full day of attention with your guys. So that kind of throws a little wrench in everyone's plans in terms of college hockey. Greg Powers expressed that he doesn't necessarily agree with the rule, but it's going to be very interesting, especially in that forward group. Another guy that I haven't even mentioned yet, Jack Beck, who won't play the first 6 games because of eligibility reasons. He'll be suspended for each of the 6 games that he played after his 22nd birthday in the AHL. Powers said that he'll be in his top 6 forwards as soon as he hits the ice for them. So that'll be a guy that they know they have in their back pocket while they still experiment with these other 12 forwards as they move along in these first 6 games.
Yeah, and it's not a suspension, right? In like the classic sense where he does anything wrong. It's just he's not able to play eligible in the first 6 games, right? You were generous in what you said there about Powers. He called it stupid
He just said he literally looked at us and he went, "It's just stupid."
Stupid. And which I agree with him. Like, how are you not going to be able to have a full amount of practice schedule with your team more than several days in advance of opening against number 5 Penn State, when we all know ASU has been so close to being an NCAA tournament team at the end of the season, and so much of that looks back at what happened in your non-conference slate. So you have all these new players that you're trying to incorporate and get a really strong feel for, and try to understand how they mesh with one another and what is the best construction of your lines in consideration of all this. And then you're like, okay, but coaches, guess what? We're not going to let you be able to do that effectively. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And especially going back to something you said earlier that I thought was very good, Jake, which was the lack of physicality on ASU's team last year was probably the biggest issue that caused a wider range of performance in that team. We saw they could skate with anybody. They were as fast, as quick. Their ability to have counters and to attack and to score in a hurry was as good as anybody. But they didn't have as much size, strength, physicality. And so when you're returning guys like Potter, like Smolin, and others who are on the undersized, they're not short by any stretch, but they're 175, 180 pound guys, right? And what you're trying to do, I would imagine, if you're Greg Powers, when you brought in some of these newcomers that are bigger, stronger guys, is you're trying to figure out how you can put your lines together to where you have a greater overall physicality to what you're doing, to then give yourself a little bit less variability in how those guys are performing, and to provide within games and throughout a season more of that sort of edge that you can rely upon across your lines. And so Powers is sort of trying to figure this stuff out with one hand tied behind his back, because you don't get to go out there and practice more with different combinations of players. And that's absolutely going to be limiting, not just to ASU, but to everybody. He said that also. This is the reality across all of hockey. But he suggested that he thought that once you're in classes, that you should be able to go to a lot more practice hours. And I can't find any fault in that. But when you have these newcomers and some of these guys are really talented and they're older and they're probably as good as a lot of the guys that ASU has returning, including some of the better players that ASU has, you need to be able to figure out in a hurry what the chemistry is like and what is the best combination of guys on your lines. He said that they're going to be better with their third and fourth lines than they have been in the past, and some of those guys would historically be playing in their top two. To me, that means that chemistry and the way that these guys play with one another is a huge component in what's going to determine the best combination of guys in sequencing. And the only way that you're going to figure that out is through playing. And so I think there's going to be a learning curve early on in this season that's a little bit unfortunate when beating a Penn State or sweeping a Penn State will have so much value later on in the year when everybody's looking, as we do, at what the rankings are and what that means as it pertains to pairwise and the prospects for being able to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and the NCAA is actually replacing the pairwise this year with a different sort of, I guess, statistical ranking called NPI. Is it NPI or RPI? NPI.
I didn't even know that. You're breaking news to me here, Gabby. I'm fully in. I'm trying the best I can to keep up with all the stuff that's going on. This is good information. What do we got?
It is NPI.
Just as we were starting to figure out the pairwise, they switch it up.
Just as we were starting to figure it out, but it is the NPI. It's very similar to the pairwise in the sense that it looks at more than just wins and losses, but it's much more scaled back in terms of how it weighs the caliber of who your opponents have also beat and how you compare
Smart.
to that, if that makes sense, which a lot of fans are happy with. It's definitely, you use the word learning curve. It's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for us too, because I just figured out the math with all the pairwise stuff last year and fully kind of started to comprehend it. But it sounds like this is very similar. We'll obviously have to get into it a little bit more, but there's much less comparison as to your record against your opponents, if that
I
makes
like
sense.
that. The opponents was having too much. We figured it out last year. It like, based upon what happened in the non-conference, it made it a lot more difficult for NCHC teams to be able to move up in the pairwise. And so perhaps this might alter that. I don't know. We'll see.
All right, I'm looking at a press release here from College Hockey News. NPI stands for NCAA Percentage Index. They just approved it on like 3-4 days ago. It's similar in a lot of ways, but the ultimate difference is that I guess they determined that the same teams would kind of had made the tournament, but the seeding was different, which could really impact a lot of the bubble teams, which is what ASU has been in the last few years. So that's where I was getting RPI from. It says NPI, like RPI, is a mathematical system that attempts to factor in a team's strength of schedule to their overall winning percentage and comes up with the rankings of all the teams nationally. So the quality of your opponents, I guess, is still weighted, which, I mean, when the committee decides a college football playoff, they kind of look at the same things. If two teams have a similar record, they'll look at strength of schedule. But it's less on, like I've been saying, how you have done against who your opponents have played. We'll get into that, I'm sure, and learn a lot more about that as the season goes on. But with that, we're going to get into the defensemen a little bit on this team. Justin Kipke, Jake, you mentioned him earlier, 6'4". That's the tallest I've seen on the back end for ASU. In a little bit, I think Ty Murchison or Noah Beck was the biggest one on the back end last year. I believe they were about 6'3". But an interesting dynamic here, kind of on the defensive side, Anthony Dowd, the only player with a letter on his jersey. He's an assistant captain on the back end, and him and Tucker Ness are the only upperclassmen on the defensive side. And then you have the trio of sophomores who are all freshmen. They're all returners from last year in Brazen Bozer, Sam Court, and Joel Shelberg. And then the rest of everybody else is freshmen and newcomers.
Yeah, Dowd is definitely going to have to step up with Murchison being gone. Murchison was with ASU for 5 years. He was one of the last players from the Oceanside era where there was asbestos falling from the ceiling onto the ice during games, which was a memory to say the least in the eyes of Powers. I'm sure he was very thankful to get out of there. But Murchison was the heart and soul of the defensive core. He led the country with 98 block shots last year. The biggest thing for Dowd is just him taking what he's learned from Murchison the last 2 years and applying it to this team. For that trio of sophomores, they also, I feel, learned a lot and were kind of thrown into the fire pretty early with Dowd, Beck, and Murchison really being the only other three reliable defensemen. So they got a lot of good experience last year. But the biggest thing is Brazen Bozier will be out for a minimum of 4 games per Greg Powers on his Hell Frozen Over podcast. It was an undisclosed injury in practice, and they're hoping to get him back after 4 games, but that is the minimum. So more to come on that in the coming weeks, I'm assuming, but that is definitely a pretty big hit. He was second on the team last year in block shots, so ASU may struggle a little bit to get bodies in front of pucks with Murchison gone and Bozer out for the first 4 games, but with the much bigger players like Justin Kipke, among others, like Sam Core, who's only 5'11", but can really fly around the ice and get a skate or a shin in front of a puck every now and then. This is a in a way new look defensive core with the trio of freshmen, Kipke leading them, but returning Dowd and the trio of sophomores was very big for Powers based off of what he saw from them. There was a lot of upside in terms of their defensive play while also helping quarterback the offense on the blue line. But Noah Beck was really that guy who was leading the offense. He was second on the team behind Sillinger with 28 assists. So I think I'll expect Kipke to kind of settle into that role that Beck was in last year, where he was kind of getting everything going. He was moving traffic, getting pucks in places for scoring opportunities. But Dowd, like you said, is the only defenseman with an assistant captain on his jersey. So I think everything's gonna go through him, whether or not he steps up like Powers expects him to.
Beck and Murchison were bigger guys. Beck was, I think you said earlier, he was probably the most physical guy on the team, while also being a pivotal creator from the blue line with their offense. So I have more questions about where they're at on this defensive side than I do about their forwards, especially when one of the key newcomers is going to miss the first couple of weeks of the season. And I want to see, like, are they going to have newcomers who have that physical presence to match what Powers is looking for in terms of bringing that aspect of their game up to contend with some of the better teams in that respect in the NCHC, whether that's Western Michigan or Denver. Those are two at the top. What are they ranked, number 1 and 3 or 1 and 4 in the preseason poll? So, and that was the big thing I noticed was in execution also to some degree, but I think execution is a product of how physical that you are in whatever circumstances, whether that's on the puck, whether that's, in contested situations, whether that's in transition and how you're able to get guys off their lanes and those types of things. I just think that element needs to take a step forward with ASU's team.
Yeah, absolutely. And one pairing we have seen just kind of skating around together at practice, this isn't concrete or anything, but Anthony Dowd and Justin Kipke have actually been kind of skating together in practice. So a very big contrast there. You have your smallest guy on the defensive side paired with your biggest guy. So that's a potential pairing, but it will definitely be interesting. Again, same thing with the forward side to see if he keeps some of those pairs together who played last year, or if he tries to scatter in some newcomers so that there's sort of a freshman or a transfer paired with a returning player on the other side. With that, just a quick note on ASU's goaltenders. Greg Powers did announce on Monday that Connor Hasley, the senior Bentley goaltender transfer, will start in between the pipes on Friday. He led the NCAA in shutouts last year with 11, kind of a whole list of accolades and honors for Hasley as he played last year. And then behind him is Sam Urban. He is a true freshman. He's coming in from the Slovakian national team. He was Team Slovakia's starter in the World Juniors Under-18 Championships. For those of you who don't know, essentially that's a country saying, hey, you are the best goaltender from our country who is currently under the age of 18. So two pretty big, I guess, I don't want to say big names, but two very accomplished goaltenders for Greg Powers. One that will backstop them this season, and one that should be kind of a good starting point for their future.
Yeah, and Hasley has a lot of experience. Bentley made the first round of the NCAA tournament last year, so he has that postseason experience and has that poise. Like you said, he led the NCAA in shutouts with 11, and that was a very difficult task for ASU's goalies last year. They only had a .909 save percentage between Luke Pavicic and Gibson Homer. Hasley has had a .925, so already a step up. And it honestly, it all ties down to the physicality. A lot of the times Pavicic and Homer had to stand on their head, as Powers would put it, when ASU would turn the puck over in their own zone, just because they kept getting pushed around on the boards and couldn't get it out. So having upgrades in both of those aspects is huge. And just a funny note about Homer, he transferred to North Dakota, the second Sun Devil in as many years to transfer to the Fighting Hawks after TJ Sempenfelter transferred over there 2 years ago. So following in the footsteps, hopefully Powers will try to keep Connor Hasley from following that trend.
Absolutely. Well, there's a preview position by position to give you a little bit of a better sense of what the lineup could look like, who you can expect to see on the ice on Friday in ASU's season opener against Penn State. We're going to be right back after a quick ad from drinkonthesly.com. We have a Penn State preview and then just kind of some of our closing thoughts as to what this matchup will look like.
So yeah, drinkontheslide.com. We have a QR code there on the screen. You're going to get 20% off if you open up that QR code and you make orders from drinkontheslide.com. They have it's a vibes-based beverage. If you need a lift, or you need to come down and get ready to sleep, or you're trying to chill, whatever it is, they have 3 different options for you. No caffeine, no sugar, no jitters, no after effects. Just try to get the vibe that you want, that you're going for, whether you need a little bit of a boost in a down period of your day, or you're trying to relax, or you're trying to sleep. Drinkontheslide.com. We had a bunch of orders already from this QR code over the first several weeks of us featuring it, and we appreciate ASU fans for supporting our sponsor, and I'm confident that people are going to enjoy the beverage, and people have already expressed as much to me, and they had a pretty good turnout at our live podcast with Kenny Dillingham, a lot of samples and some good feedback already from that. So make sure you take us up on this offer here.
Absolutely, take us up on the offer. And if you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, we'll have a link to drinkontheslide.com in the description of the podcast, so you can check them out there as well. I know I definitely took advantage of some of those freebies. I may have stolen a can or two out of the little, they were very cool actually. They were like little sly can shaped coolers, I guess.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
But I snagged a couple of the berry ones out of there. That's my favorite flavor.
Okay.
Back to hockey. Penn State, obviously a very, very highly anticipated matchup, a top 15 matchup. The 48th sellout in Mullet Arena. Student section sold out tickets for both days in less than 5 hours after they dropped. NHL Network has picked up this feed, Everything College Hockey, a national outlet. They'll be on campus doing a lot of stuff with Penn State's Gavin McKenna. He's the consensus #1 overall pick for the 2026 NHL draft. And there's just a lot of hum surrounding this game, Chris.
It's pretty amazing to see what Greg Powers and ASU hockey have been able to accomplish, going from what Jake mentioned earlier was a building that pretty much needed to be condemned upon ASU's departure to now having one of the best arenas in the country for college hockey, having sellouts. We've talked about this in the past, but the feedback that we get from our hockey coverage is like probably neck and neck with men's basketball or baseball. Like, it's as popular as anything other than football that we're doing. And that's what has led to our interest in delving in even more, to having more hockey coverage. Gabby, you do a great job covering it for us last year. Jake Sloan was a regular hockey reporter last year covering ASU. And I would venture to say that the two of you know as much as any of the students at Cronkite who are covering ASU hockey, and it's really exciting for me and for the people at SunDevilSource to be able to benefit from those insights. And Greg Powers has been really helpful with just I think he does a great job of like conveying his perspectives around the team in a very genuine way. Like a Kenny Dillingham, you know that you're getting like his true actual perspective and sense about the football team. And I think Greg Powers is the same way. He was pretty candid about the vulnerabilities and flaws of ASU's team last year, things that contributed to some of the inconsistency that we saw, with the team, and how that kept it from being a lock kind of as an NCAA tournament team, and then going out and trying to address those things with recruiting. Some of these older transfers or older freshmen coming in who are a couple years removed from high school already that are expected to make a big impact. And I don't know that much about them other than what statistically they were able to do with their prior stops, and how they're expected to factor in to the lines and where they're going to be. But will both be there for these opening games, and I think that will allow us to have a really good, or at least an improving sense of where this team is at and what it's capable of. This is a matchup between Cullen Potter, who's maybe ASU's best hockey prospect ever, or at least arguably, right? And Penn State having one of the best players in the country and somebody who's going to be a first rounder and a first overall pick even perhaps. And there's going to be a lot of excitement and anticipation into it. And I'm fired up as well, just to be there and to the venue at Mullen Arena also is tremendous. In fact, it's the way that they engage the crowd through their production is better than you see at any other sport at ASU. And I feel like a lot can be learned and taken from that in terms of how they structure their programming and the production within games, because it really keeps the crowd super engaged, and it's a very hyped environment at all times. And so, hey, they're starting it up again, and we're going to be there for it.
Should be as loud as ever this weekend, especially just to kind of give a little bit more of a specific sense as to what ASU is up against with this Penn State team. Penn State is returning 75% of its offense, including its top 6 goal scorers from last year, including Aiden Fink. He was a top 10 Hobey Baker finalist last year. And then one of their newcomers, actually son of Penn State head coach Guy Godowski, Matt Godowski, is joining them on the defensive side as well. He was also a top 10 Hobey Baker finalist last year. Penn State is the only school in the NCAA to have multiple top 10 Hobey Baker finalists on their roster. We talked about Gavin McKenna. Obviously, he's the talk of the town. He's really the talk of the entire college hockey world, especially this weekend. I mean, NHL Network, as we said, has picked up this game, and it's pretty much because of him. Some of their other newcomers, Lev Katzen, he is transferring in from the OHL. He just won a gold medal with Team Canada's World Junior team last winter. And then another notable guy, he was the 14th overall pick in last year's NHL draft, defenseman Jackson Smith. So some other pretty highly touted guys on this roster. You have a first-round pick from last year. You have the guy who's going to be the number 1 overall pick next year. Hobey Baker finalists, and just a plethora of other guys who are returning for this Penn State team. So a dangerous one to watch out for as well. Greg Powers was not kidding when he said, we're as deep and as talented as ever, but so is every other team in the country.
Yeah, and Penn State last year sort of surged late and ended up in the NCAA tournament, beating Maine and UConn before losing in the Frozen Four to Boston University. So when you mention that they have 75% of their returning scoring and a lot of their are returning, top players are returning, it seems to make sense why this is a top 5 team in the preseason. And one of the better opponents that ASU will face all season long, even with it being in the NCHC, playing against multiple other top 5, top 10 type teams. So it's a really good early barometer for where the Sun Devils are at. And again, it all these games matter so much when you're projected to be once again probably on or around the bubble. And we'll see if that materializes. But getting a sweep would be huge. Getting a split would be a solid entry point into the season for ASU.
Yeah, and it's really cool, too, that this series has garnered so much national attention, because these are two of the newer NCAA Division I college hockey programs that we've seen. Just under 15 years ago, Penn State made their debut as a Division I program after advancing from the club level ACHA up to the NCAA. And then about a decade ago, ASU did the same thing. So Greg Powers has had really high praise for head coach of Penn State, Guy Gadowski, for just kind of being one of the most recent pioneers. And he's even admitted that, they're following in his footsteps a little bit. He was kind of a trailblazer, both these programs trailblazers in that regard. And he had a funny story about how when ASU was still an ACHA club team, they played Penn State when they were first starting out as a Division I program, and they beat them the second night. And it's always a big deal when club teams beat Division I programs. We saw it happen last year. UNLV is another club program that's kind of on the rise. They went to Denver and beat Denver last year. Granted, it was during the World Juniors, and Denver's head coach was the head coach of Team USA for the World Juniors, and they had a bunch of their players playing on the roster. But still, it's still newsworthy nonetheless. It always makes the hockey headlines when things like that happen. But just one last thing, I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this team gels this year. And Greg Powers has said it, I believe, the last 2 years that I've been covering this team, at least, is that this is the deepest roster we've had. Looking at this roster on paper, I think it has the potential to compete with any of those, like you said, Western Michigan, Penn State this weekend, Denver, any of those kind of teams that are considered blue bloods or kind of powerhouses in college hockey. And so just, as you mentioned earlier, growing pains, once they kind of work out some of the kinks, really get themselves into a good rhythm and a good lineup, seeing where everybody fits in. I think this will be a very exciting team to watch, and Mullet Arena will be loud as ever this year.
Yeah, and I don't think they play another ranked team until like mid-November. So we're a preseason ranked team. I could be wrong, but so right out of the gate, try to get one and then build into the rest of the non-conference. And I think they have Colorado College coming up in several weeks, which is just outside the top 25 before they really get into the meat grinder of the NCHC. So we'll have more updates on hockey throughout the year and into next year, and looking forward to spending more time talking about it on the podcast.
Yes, indeed. And if you've been looking at any of the artwork behind Chris in this episode of the podcast, our good friend Christopher Roach does a wonderful job with ASU artwork. He has even more than that, but I'm sure obviously a lot of you watching are ASU fans, so this will cater widely to a lot of you. But yeah, this is he just does a great job. I have a piece of his, and it always looks great.
Someone who is a member at SunDevilSource told me the other day that he wanted to buy several of Christopher Roach's originals, which are pretty impressive pieces of substance, and a significant amount of time and effort goes into them. And so that was heartening for us to hear that somebody who's following us wanted to, as part of their renovation of their home, wanted to incorporate some of these nice pieces that Christopher Roach has done. So definitely check out his work at ChristopherRoachArt.com, ROCHE art.com. And still trying to sell the one here that's behind me with the you see on the screen, the Camp T original water tower. And then there's other ones that have been signed by Kenny Dillingham, one of which was given away to Ray Artige, who's a prominent local sports and media relations and a professional. So that was pretty cool also. And yeah, all of our sponsors, thank you so much.
Well, as Greg Powers said, there are no nights off in the NCHC and throughout this schedule this year especially, and it all starts on Friday night at 7 p.m. against Penn State. You can watch on NCHC TV, NHL Network, or the NHL's YouTube channel has even picked it up, so very accessible to a wide audience if you want to check out some ASU hockey. And then they play at 5 p.m. on Saturday evening as well. Number 14, ASU against number 5, Penn State, should be in for a very exciting weekend. We'll be there all weekend, providing you all the coverage that you need for the series. And until Monday, we'll be back with our regularly scheduled live podcast from Rack Scottsdale. Gabby Chernoff and Chris Cartman for SunDevilSource. We will see you on Monday.